Hello, everyone. What's been going on? Y'all been having a good week? I got a pretty nice little discussion here between Gary Stearman and Tom Horn, and they're going to be talking about the Apocrypha. So I'm going to bring that to everybody. Let's take a listen.
Lord, to Prophecy in the News. Of course, Tom, you've been here many times before. Always good to have you back.
Yeah, it's always great to get to be here, Gary. Thanks for inviting me.
Tom Horn is really a driving force today in Christian publication. And he's got a sense about what you, the Christian student of the Bible, want to know about. And Tom, we've gotten a lot of calls here at Prophecy in the News over the years asking for just such a publication as this one. And we're going to talk in some depth and detail about it. Tell us how this particular publication came to life. Again, it's called the Researcher's Library of Ancient Texts, Volume 1. I take it more is to come later.
Yeah. Actually, at this time, we are planning that in 2012 there'll be 2 more volumes that will complete this series. Actually, it's a collection of ancient books. And what happened, Gary, as you know, is that in January of this year, my house burned to the ground. And my wife, Nita, and I lost everything that was in it, including a library.
Not just a library, folks. I've heard descriptions of this library, and it was an exceptional library. And Tom, I think back to that time, and I was amazed at how you took it. You sort of took it in stride. I don't know whether I could have done that or not.
Well, it was probably a pretty good bluff, actually. What are you going to do?
Yeah, exactly.
They say you can't cry over spilled milk or ancient libraries that you've been building for over 30 years. I actually started collecting these books when I was a young pastor, and I pastored for 25 years. I've been married for almost 40. So it'd been a long time, and at one point that library got so large I gave a bunch of books away, and then you know what I did? I refined it down to the best ones.
Ooh, the ones you didn't want to lose.
Yeah, but I found out that old paper, it burns really hot.
Oh, man.
But you know what happened, Gary, was right away we got into a temporary home while we were working with the insurance company and all that to start building a new house, which I'm glad to be able to report now that the new house is finished. But a couple of months into this temporary house, I was doing a project, going to start a writing project, and I went to reach for one of my books to verify something from history, and it dawned on me that it was gone. And just immediately, of course, I felt crippled with regard to do serious research.
Absolutely.
And to verify facts and history. And so I immediately set out to start rebuilding that library, and that's when it dawned on me how many other people would also benefit from having access to these books. And like yourself, how many times had I heard from different people where I would speak or in one of my books maybe make reference to an ancient text, and we would get emails and phone calls, where can I get a copy of the Book of Enoch, or where can I get a copy of the Book of Jubilees? And people are frustrated because some of these books, there are versions of them online, but there are a lot of contaminated versions, and nobody knows what to trust. And so that's when it came to me as a publisher that this would be a very valuable thing, especially I think as we move into the end of prophetic times. We often refer to end times and we refer to prophecy, but I think we're moving into the end of prophetic times, and people need as many resources as they can put their hands on that they can trust in order to do serious research.
Well, Tom's new book, it's just amazing. The Researcher's Library contains all the things you want for study aids. And how do I know that? Because, Tom, we get calls here at Prophecy in the News all the time. We will refer to a book that we've used for research, and somebody out there in the audience will say, I need that book. They'll call us and say, do you have that book? No, I'm sorry, that's an old sort of out-of-print book. For example, my Book of Enoch, the R.H. Charles edition, was copyrighted in 1917, reprinted in 1978. It's an old book.
Mm-hmm.
And people will ask, can you send us a Book of Enoch? We'd love it. And we'd love to be able to do it. Well, now we can, because the very first book is in this collection is the R.H. Charles Book of Enoch, the very one that we think is the best. J.R. Church thought it was the best. I think it's the best. You think it's the best edition.
And one thing I would point out right away for anybody that might have this question in the back of their mind, none of these books are on a par with the inspiration of the Scripture. So
Right.
we're not making the case that these are divinely inspired books, but what we are saying is, just like in universities, when students that might be watching this program that are enrolled right now in a university, they're earning a degree in divinity, often these are required texts, and they are, because they're supplementary resources.
Mhm.
They help you understand kind of the times, Bible lands, geography, cultural expressions.
Oh, sure.
And by using them in that way, then they can serve just like the antiquities, Flavius Josephus and so many different pastors. Probably most pastors have those books sitting on their library shelves and often will refer to them.
Well, I want to remind everybody, and I'm picking up my old Bible here, and it's the King James Bible, and we have in Jude 14, and Enoch also, the seventh from Adam, prophesied of these who? False teachers. Enoch talked about false teachers in the end times. That's the times in which we're living right now, and on into the tribulation, saying, Behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000 of his saints to execute judgment upon all, and to convince or convict all that are ungodly among them of all their ungodly deeds which they've ungodly committed, and of all their hard speeches which ungodly sinners have spoken against him. And that comes right out of the beginning of the book of Enoch. And that is not to say that all of the book of Enoch is to be considered canonized scripture, but it does put the imprimatur of worthwhile history on the book of Enoch.
Well, absolutely. And as a matter of fact, in a series that you and J.R. Church did, where you talked about the book of Enoch, the point was made, I think, by J.R. that for 700 years following the crucifixion of Christ, the book of Enoch was read in churches. It was considered by many of the church fathers to be inspired scripture. In fact, the epistle of Barnabas refers to it. Clement of Alexandria, who was a personal friend of the Apostle Paul, accepted it as divinely inspired, as scripture. And so many of the early church fathers did. And even those who did not hold it to be part of the canon continued to use it. We found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, in the Qumran text, the Essene community had fragments of the book of Enoch that was found there. And so historical records that they used in the same way that we would use them today, and in the same way we're actually encouraging people to have them as a library of researchable text that can help in understanding biblical times. But the book of Enoch has a lot of very amazing qualities to it too. In fact, it could be the oldest book in the world.
It could well be, and if you just take the Bible at its face value, Enoch was written in the days of Jared, which dates it, right? I mean, Enoch lived in the days of Jared before God took him, and he was seen no more on planet Earth. He was physically taken aloft, and so we know when he lived on Earth. That must be the time he wrote the book. And the fascinating thing to me, Tom, is that he wrote about the end times. Of all things, living as far back in history as he did, he looked way into the future, and he wrote about the tribulation. He wrote about God's judgment. He wrote about the things the angels were doing in order to bring about God's plan. And he took many amazing journeys, which he recounts believably. That is, there's a lot in the book that just has the ring of authenticity.
Right. In fact, in that series with you and JR, I keep referring to it because I happened to be watching it last night, knowing that I was going to come down here and talk with you about this, and I was just reminded at what a superb program that was. Probably some of the best ever recorded in prophetic television ministries. But you made a point that really stood out to me, and it went to verifying the authenticity of Enoch's account, where he's describing taking his tour of the earth, and he's in that house. We can talk about that house too if you like, but a flying house with windows, right? Being piloted by these angelic beings.
Yeah.
But his description, as he's flying over the earth, the way he describes it, and the mountain ranges, and you made the point that as a pilot, that you would only be able to describe what's happening on Earth beneath you in that kind of language if you really had flown, if you were up there.
That is absolutely true, and I've of course flown for many, many years, and you develop a way of looking down at the Earth and making sense of it. You know, when you first start to fly, it's common to lose your position. It's very easy to get lost while flying. But after you've been flying 20 or 30 years, you don't get lost anymore because your brain adapts to looking at the world from above, and you see the curve of the horizon, and you watch the clouds, and you record lakes, streams, rivers, mountains in a particular way. Well, that's what Enoch did. In his book, it's obvious. Anyone who's ever flown knows that Enoch must have flown because he reports on things perfectly.
Yeah. Now, it might be a little bit offside, but his descriptions of the flying house, they're quite interesting, aren't they?
Better than an airplane, that flying house. He got into a flying house. He described it as being crystalline in nature. He described pulsing with power of various kinds, feeling the walls and they were cold, and feeling other places and they were hot. And he really reports on this thing as though it's an actual, well, he called it a flying house. To me, it's something else entirely.
Right. I mean, if we saw this today, would we be calling this a UFO or something?
Yes, we would.
A Merkavim. This is an angelic flying craft of some type. Sure. And actually, in the book of Enoch, he describes getting in the small one that then goes up to a larger one.
Absolutely.
Is this like a mothership?
Mothership.
Yeah.
Of all things.
I mean, we use that kind of terminology, but it's kind of like Ezekiel and his experience with this, what seems to be a craft of some type that was being piloted by the angels.
Now, we've only talked about one of many, many books that are included here, and before we get too much farther, we need to talk about the book of Jasher, the book of Jubilees. J.R. and I have done studies that included both of those books over the years. First and Second Esdras, First, Second Maccabees, Tobias, and on. And these would be intertestamental books. That is, they cover the historical period between the Old and the New Testament, sometimes called the Apocrypha, and a lot of people can't find those today. They're good history in many, many ways. They will tell you, for example, about the story of Antiochus IV Epiphanes, the pseudo-Antichrist who lived back in the 3rd century BC, and on it goes. I don't know where you want to carry this conversation. We've got a lot to talk about.
Yeah. Well, but we're also tying this to that Enoch series, and I might be hung up on that for a moment.
That's
now,
okay.
We can go wherever you want to go. We can talk about Jasher. Jubilees actually is interesting in that it's also tied to Enoch.
Right.
And one of the things that's also interesting is how we learn in Jubilees about the dispensation of the angels. But it repeats the story that is most well known probably from the book of Enoch, and that is of these very powerful angels called Watchers, who descended in the days of Jared, came down upon Mount Hermon, but specifically involved themselves in trying to alter the genetic material that was Adam for the purposes of introducing like a satanic seed.
Absolutely. In fact, in my opinion, in J.R.'s opinion, I know in your opinion, the whole story of the Bible is built around the seed of the serpent versus the seed of the woman. And, of course, you've done amazing research on that and still are. That's the story of the Bible. And Enoch supplies so much information. And it kind of fills in some blanks that we don't have in other places.
Well, and we learned that Enoch was the person who was first given language, the ability to write. And what's astonishing, as I understand it, is that Enoch actually wrote at least portions of the book of Enoch in Hebrew before there was any such thing as Hebrew. Before Abram came along, and you have the Hebrew tribes.
In fact, that does raise a fascinating question. We know that the books of Moses were written in Hebrew, and Jesus referred to Moses using an instrument to write with. Jesus called it writing. Moses wrote his books, said Jesus. Well, that means he had a language and an alphabet. We assume that it was a Proto-Hebrew. Then going back to Enoch's time, it just makes sense that was written in the same language, because God taught Adam to speak. And I'm convinced that he also read and wrote in the heavenly language, which, by the way, goes back to the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet with which God spoke the world into existence, so say the Jewish historians. So we've got a track or a written trail of writing, written history that goes all the way back before the flood.
Tertullian, he claimed that the Orthodox Jews were the ones who rejected the book of Enoch from the canon for one specific reason, because it prophesied the coming of Jesus Christ.
Wow.
That in fact, it forecast him even as the Son of Man.
Exact, and it uses the term.
It does.
Amazing.
Here's the quote that Enoch makes, where he starts describing the Son of Man. He actually takes a tour to heaven, and there I saw one who had a head of days, and his head was white like wool, and with him was another being whose countenance had the appearance of a man, and his face was full of graciousness like one of the holy angels. And I asked the angel who went with me, and showed me all the hidden things concerning that Son of Man, who he was, and whence he was, and why he went with the head of days. And he answered and said unto me, This is the Son of Man, who hath righteousness. And he goes on, of course, to describe him in language that immediately reflects what we learn of Christ in the New Testament.
And that would have been rejected by those who did not want the Son of Man to make an appearance.
That's right.
Wow.
Yeah.
All very interesting. The flying house, the descent of the fallen angels is in the book of Enoch. The things that they did to humans, the sins that they committed before the flood, all written in the book of Enoch. And of course, Tom, it's just amazing. I believe the time has come. I can remember 20, 30 years ago, as can you, that there really wasn't that much demand for these books, because people had not been sensitized to their importance at that time. But I think we have moved on into the latter part of the last days, perhaps, and the time has come to read what these books have to say.
Well, one of the other books that's in here, the book of Jasher, when you and I've done shows on the genetics revolution, it seems today that we are repeating something that happened in the days of Noah.
Yeah.
And is that prophetic? And when I was doing research on transgenics and the genetic modification, the blending of humans and animals, I went back and reread the book of Jasher, and for the first time something jumped out of me in the fourth chapter, where he starts talking about, after these angels had revealed the secrets of heaven to men, then men begin blending animals, one species with another, therewith to provoke the Lord. And so for the first time, actually what appears to be advanced biotechnology leaped from the pages of this ancient book.
Right.
And it was one of the texts that stood out to me. So there's so much material in these records. And then, of course, Jubilees, the Maccabean Wars, Antiochus Epiphanes.
It's all there.
The first Maccabees with the Alexander the Great's invasion of Judea. So there's so much rich history there that can be beneficial.
Historical bypaths, just the part that Tom mentioned about the little details about the fallen angels that just add validity to the story. And you don't see them anywhere else. The book of Jasher is basically an annotated version of the books of Moses. Now, that is, moving into Genesis and so forth, it annotates, it gives little historical bypaths as handed down by the elders of Israel. So I think it's very much worth your while. These books have to be studied in context, and not as the inspired word of God, but rather as historical supplementation. But believe me, you'll profit from them.
Well, sure. In the same way, if I'm a student in school and I need to understand American history and I read about Abraham Lincoln, I don't I would never elevate it to be an inspired text or immutable or infallible or anything else, but the only way to truly understand what might have been happening in a given period of time is to have these various kind of cultural references that can assist us. Now, there is one other point that I would make about the Book of Enoch, and that is it identifies who and where the trigger for Armageddon is going to begin, and it's in the news. It's in the headlines right now. It is prophecy in the news right now.
In fact, it is, and he's talking about Persia. There's a prince of Persia mentioned in the book of Daniel. He's an overlord, a spiritual overlord. And we know that Persia has always been important in Bible prophecy, going all the way back to the days of Ahasuerus, and Queen Esther, and we go all the way through Xerxes, Ezra, Nehemiah. Daniel finishes his great work, and he, in fact, lives till the end of his life in Persia. The Magi who came to visit Christ came out of Persia. There's just so much. And there's Persia mentioned by Enoch. And what does he say?
Yeah, and who is Persia today?
Well, it's Iran. And by the way, the Persians renamed their country in the modern era. They called it Iran because of Aryanism. They believe that they are the Aryans of ancient history. And so the way to say Aryan in the Persian language, Farsi, is to say Iran. And they named themselves, or they renamed themselves, but we know who they really are. They're Persia.
Yeah. And of course, Iran right now is trying to develop the kind of weaponized nuclear capacity.
Right.
And many experts believe that if they get their hands on such technology, they would use it, perhaps maybe in their belief that they could somehow bring about the return of the Mahdi.
Absolutely. They are chaos theorists. They believe that if they create chaos, their Messiah, the Mahdi, will come back. And so Enoch blows the whistle on these guys. He says they're going to start the big war. Surprise, surprise.
Surprise, surprise. The oldest book in history telling us from whence the trigger for Armageddon will begin. Isaiah, in the 13th chapter of Isaiah, also talks about the destruction of Babylon and that whole area in and around ancient Persia, and seems to describe what might be thought of as a nuclear holocaust.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tom, I don't know where the time goes, but here we have just a little over a minute. And what else would you like to tell people?
Well, just I can tell you that we've been getting a lot of comment from our own news service about this as a holiday gift. People who have serious Bible researchers in their family, we're getting a lot of very positive feedback from them that we've made this available and we've made it affordable. And so
absolutely, and it would make a wonderful Christmas gift. Any student of the Bible would be pleased to get this.
It's collectible, and there'll be 2 more volumes this next year, so there you go.
Tom Horn, and one of the hardest working men around, believe me, he's always got some new project. And Tom, we're going to have you back again real soon.
All right.
And Tom is a writer, publisher, lecturer, all of.
Well, what'd y'all think? I thought it was pretty interesting. I mentioned the Book of Enoch before and all the nice information contained within it. I think it's really helpful. I think it's true. Like, it just reinforces what is in the Bible already. And he did look far in the future, and he did see everything. It's interesting to read that. Now, been hearing some stuff about the Marines that peed on the dead bodies of the Taliban. But let's put things into perspective of war. All things of that and what's done in it are not good. But when you get stuff like this, yeah, that's bad. But remember, they do things like behead people. You know, whatever happened over there now with these Marines, somebody taped them doing it, right? And showed them supposedly peeing on Taliban that were killed. But these guys, they tape people that aren't soldiers that they kidnap, and they tape them cutting their heads off. You know, 12-year-old Taliban boy beheads man on video. You know, they cut heads off and put them on video and stuff. So, I mean, obviously there's a difference between taping your enemy you've killed and you're urinating on him, and then taping whoever you're getting ready to cut their head off. It's all bad, but you can't forget things like this. You know, we're not sure what happened, but they're gonna do whatever they're gonna do, and you're gonna hear about it in the media for a while. But remember, there's a lot more of our brave guys over there than just those 4. So don't let what the 4 did paint all of them as like that, because they certainly aren't. That's why war is war. Horrible things happen in war. You know, you get a bunch of guys out there killing people, and it's not exactly like there's a referee. And that's kind of sort of my thoughts. I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying we did a bad thing, but they do a lot worse things whenever they tape things and put things on there. Cutting a head off is a lot different than, like I said, whatever is being shown now. But it ought to be interesting to see the way they portray this and hear Mrs. Clinton speaking sternly. We'll see how it comes out. Heading into the weekend. Cold here now. All of a sudden the weather changed, and I'm not sure what the temperature was. It was, I think, about 20 or 22. It had been in the 60s. So we got a cold blast from the north somewhere. No snow, just real cold. So I got a little something else I'm going to put on here. I've got some L.A. Marzulli coming up for you. So I'm going to get ready to get that one going. I'll talk to y'all real soon. God bless everyone.